I was born at Cedars of Lebanon Hospital in Los Angeles, which interestingly enough is now the world headquarters for the Church of Scientology. My parents met in Los Angeles after World War II. My dad was from Rochester, New York. My mother grew up in St. Louis, Missouri. We originally lived in Los Angeles, but when I was only a couple of years old, moved to Culver City, California, which is a movie making center in Southern California, and is actually where most movies were made. We had MGM Studios, Desilu, Hal Roach Studios, all located in Culver City. My grandfather came from Russia by way of England. He was a tailor, and my grandmother was actually born in Rochester, New York. Her parents were from Hungary. They met in Rochester, New York, and my grandparents ran a liquor store, and at one time they also had a tailor shop. After World War II, my dad relocated to Los Angeles, and my grandparents came out to relocate and be with my father in Los Angeles, and they opened Maxon's and Son, a haberdashery in Hollywood. I grew up in Culver City, as I said. I went to Culver High School. Culver City was a small town in the middle of a large city, but it had that small town feel. And it's in high school that I became interested in music. Specifically, when the Hootenanny show was televised, I began to watch that and developed an interest in playing folk music. The first instrument I picked up was the banjo, but I quickly transitioned to the guitar and was invited to play guitar and bass in a jug band called the Slats. We actually had made a bass out of a bass drum and a 2x4, and it actually worked quite well. I also started playing the Autoharp in that group, and actually I played Autoharp more than any other instrument in that jug band. I joined a garage band called the Original Sins. We played dances locally, and at one time we were invited to play in various lounge shows in Las Vegas because of family connections that I had there. On one occasion, we actually opened for B.B. King at the Desert Inn, and I was lucky enough to meet B.B. King. And actually, after the show, he and I played blackjack together. He did quite well, but as usual, I won absolutely nothing. I met my lovely wife, Sandy, in my first year of law school. We were set up by a blind date by my mom and her mom, who were sitting under the hair dryers at the local beauty parlor, and set us up. Our first date was a disaster. We were diametrically opposite in every respect. What she liked, I hated, and vice versa. But something clicked, and a year later we were married. After law school, Sandy and I moved to Los Angeles, where I started practicing law. And after a few years, we had two children, Jill Marie, who lives in Sacramento with her husband, and my two grandchildren, and my son Matthew, who's currently in Los Angeles. About 10 years ago, after practicing law in Los Angeles for almost 30 years, I decided to move up to Coarsegold. Living in the mountains appealed to me, but I kept the practice in Los Angeles going, and my son currently manages the office in Los Angeles. I've had a lot of interests over the years. Initially, I became fascinated with firearms and developed an interest in hunting and competitive shooting. I even bought and sold firearms for a period of time. I've also had interest in stamp collecting. I collected coins, postcards, minerals. I've collected fossils, and actually I donated my fossil collection to Fresno State University. I also became interested in Civil War reenactment, and I actually joined a Civil War reenactment artillery battery. And at one time I owned a full-size working 10-pounder Parrott rifle, which I kept in my garage until my wife told me that it had to go, and go it went. A lot of people don't know what a Parrott rifle is. It's a Civil War cannon that was rifled and was used to shoot long distances rather than smooth bores, which were used at short distance. One of the outgrowths of my interest in firearms was an opportunity to appear in a motion picture called Secrets of the KGB UFO. I was to play a firearms expert and describe whether or not the film of the UFO was authentic. It was kind of a fun experience, and I actually got paid to do it.
They're all wearing winter coats, which don't appear to have much in the way of insignia on them. And that is not out of character for the winter coats. They would generally not contain much in the way of identification. The weapons are AK-type weapons, automatic Kalashnikov weapon. Yeah, it's clearly an AK, thick stock, birch stock, no muzzle brake, milled receiver, no question about it.
I've also had an interest in horseback riding and own an Arabian, which I use for trail riding. I played golf badly, but I enjoyed it. I really enjoy the outdoors. One of the reasons I moved to Coarsegold is I love the mountains. I've gone whitewater rafting, hunting. I've explored archaeological sites throughout the country. Life has been good to me, and one of the factors that has made my life so pleasant is my interest in music. After law school, I began playing music again in 1983, took up the mandolin and the banjo more seriously. Played for a few years, but then family life and professional requirements kind of cut into that factor. It wasn't until I moved back up to Coarsegold that I was able to get back into the music and found that I really, really enjoyed it. I became acquainted with the jam session at the Santa Fe Basque restaurant and joined that a few years ago, and that was just been a wonderful experience for me, especially playing with Kenny Hall, who had been an idol of mine when I was starting to learn mandolin in 1983. I must confess to having a severe disease. It's variously called GAS and MAS, which is guitar acquisition syndrome and mandolin acquisition syndrome, and it's taken over my life. A few months after I started playing at the Bass Jam Session, I met Mike Mueller, and we started jamming together and playing music, and he then invited me to the California Autoharp gathering. I didn't know what it was, but he explained that it was a weekend in which Autoharp players gathered and were given certain workshops. And I explained that I didn't play Autoharp, but he said that wasn't a factor, and so I went to my first session of the California Autoharp gathering about 5 years ago. I love the camaraderie of the adults coming together once a year, seeing the same people that they see once a year, and having a mutual interest in the Autoharp. I love the fact that there are children there that are experiencing music for the first time and also experience the outdoors and the mountains. The entire atmosphere and experience while you're at CAG is one of excitement, pleasure and a renewal of the spirit. And I think that's the best way that I can articulate it. I don't think I've ever attended another musical event where there is such a high ratio of talent and instructors. There are concerts in the evening, and some really fine artists are performing to a very, very intimate group, and that's a real pleasure.